the legal department happen. I need you, Cliff Page, to understand that I'm making a movie about what it was like for us to be at Andover in the early 1960s. And this movie might play on all forms of media now known or yet to be invented, in all territories on this earth now known or yet to be discovered, not to exclude outer space, not to exclude new dimensions that may be discovered in outer space forever. May I have your permission to use portions of
Yes,
this interview in such a movie?
You have my permission.
Thanks. Also, I might do a book, as I did for the football movie. I don't know if I will. But if I do, it'll be an expanded version of the interviews. If I were to do such a book, could I have your permission to use portions of this interview in such a book?
Yes, you have my permission.
Good deal. Where'd you grow up? What kind of background did you come from?
I grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut. I grew up, my father died when I was 5 years old. He was a scientist who worked on the Manhattan Project.
Oh, really?
He was drafted, he worked in Bridgeport, he went to MIT. He was working at Remington Arms. He was drafted into the Navy, and he and my mother worked on he worked on the Hanford Project. They lived in the state of Washington for about 4 years. He died in 1952 of cancer, which was caused by splitting atoms in a lab with only a white coat on. My mother sent my brother and me to a private school where I now work, a boys' school. And I had a very privileged upbringing. It was a shame not to have a father. My mother never remarried.
Wow. Was there a particular accident or incident?
No, many of the scientists died. All they knew about was to wear white jackets and goggles.
Yeah.
And they were splitting atoms and the blue light and everything. I have a book that's a lot of the secrets of the whole atomic bomb project that I found in my father's belongings. But it was an amazing thing that he was involved in that. He was a physicist.
There was somebody at Alamogordo who had 2 critical lumps of plutonium or something, and he went like this.
Yeah.
Created a dirty bomb in the room, basically.
That's basically that's all. They didn't know anything,
Yeah.
and they knew the philosophies were they were creating something to make world peace. He was very upset when the bomb was dropped, as most of the scientists were. But he came back they moved back from Washington. They lived under assumed names there while they were in the state of Washington. And he came back, got a job, and died pretty quickly afterwards.
Whose idea was it that you go to Andover?
It was my idea. I was going to Fairfield Country Day School, and the headmaster of the school, who was one of my mentors, suggested I look at Andover. And my mother drove me up there, and I just thought it was a perfect school, and I only applied to Andover.
You were there 3 years?
3 years. I came as a lower.
Right. Tell me anything about your first day, the first few days, your first impressions.
I had not really been away from home until my first day at Andover. I was not a summer camp kid. I had gone to school here. I had friends, but I was pretty much a homebody with a lot of pressure to be a homebody from my mother as a single parent. First day I was dropped off at the Andover. I was dropped off at Bancroft Hall, and my dorm master was Tom McCullough. And I went up to my room and started putting things away, and I didn't know what else to do. I just kind of sat on my bed. McCullough was a smart guy. He got these, he knew I was a soccer player. And he got a couple guys from the soccer team to come and get me and help move furniture. And I started moving furniture, and from then on I had just a wonderful time. The next morning I got up and I wanted to go to breakfast, but I wasn't going to ask anyone where the dining room was. So I ended up in chapel. It's, I think, the last time I missed breakfast. I wanted to do it on my own. I found I got acclimated very quickly and really enjoyed most everything about the experience.
Stan McCullough, I think.
Tom McCullough.
Tom McCullough.
Tom McCullough.
Coached the Sixers. He's a math teacher.
Math teacher. He used to be the boxing coach when they still had boxing there. Boxing had gone out a couple of years before I got there.
He was drafted by the Giants, I believe.
Yeah. Big, really very nice man. He also started the ABC program,
All right.
A Better Chance, because I worked for him in the summer for one summer.
That was the first movie I made. Was about BC at Andover in 1972. Could you turn your chair a little bit more this way? I'm getting a reflection in your glasses here. Okay.
Better?
Yeah, thanks. All right. All right, so it didn't take you long to get acclimatized. You were a varsity soccer player for 3 years. So
Correct. Yeah, well, one of the greatest relationships I had there was with my soccer coach, Frank Di Clemente, who's also known as Deke. I really got to know him. He really adopted me, I think, as a kid. He knew I didn't have a father. He ended up becoming friends with my mother, would go out to dinner with us when we came up there. He had a tremendous influence on me. He was not the greatest soccer coach I've ever known. But man, I would have run through a wall for him. He was just such a good human being. And I found my 3 years on the varsity soccer team, I didn't play much as a lower at all. I think there were only 2 lowers that made the team. And then I played a lot as a junior, and then I played every game as a senior. But it was never about the games or the soccer. The relationship with Deke was so strong. I found out in talking to him years later that he was getting up to 100 calls every New Year's Eve from former soccer players who had had a few drinks and decided to toast their old coach. So from then on, they called him on New Year's Eve. And he loved it.
JV baseball. He was wonderful. All right, let's. I think I can see where this is going, but let me ask the question. This is sort of the nub of the whole exercise. You were there for 3 years. How did you like it?
I found it to be 3 of the most stimulating years of my life because I met people I would not have spoken to before. I was pretty locked into Fairfield and sort of hanging out with the same people. What I liked best about Andover was the chance just to talk to other people. I enjoyed the intellectual atmosphere. I had never really worked very hard in school until I got to Andover. I had a lot of ability and I didn't use it very much. I think the 3 years in Andover were the only time I really used it. And I found the challenges. I had some great teachers. I love math. I had great math teachers. I had Peters for math, who was a real challenge for me. I remember after about the first week in math, writing a letter to my mother saying, I think this is the wrong school for me because everyone is much smarter than I am. And I was used to being the best. And it was really a good experience for me. I had Mr. Graham, who was, I can't remember what Mr. Graham did. Bill Graham, I think his name was. I had him for math 1 year, and I had Best for math 1 year. So I had really outstanding math teachers.
In your 3 years there, was there a day or an hour or a moment even that you recall as being the best?
That's a great question. I think one of my best moments had to do with soccer once again, and it was my junior year. And the first game of the season was against Dartmouth. And we had a pep rally outside the Commons the night before. And it was at the time when Muhammad Ali was writing poems. And I decided to write a poem and read it like Muhammad Ali when I was called up to speak or whatever. And I made a poem, it was, sting like a butterfly, float like a bee. But I used the word sit, and then I had it rhyme with shit, but I didn't say it at the end. And I was called into Mr. Kemper's office for being vulgar. And it all made sense to me, but it was still important. I was so glad to be noticed like that. And actually, it was a great way to get to know Kemper, which most people didn't get to know him. My senior year, I was a proctor, I think they called it then, and I got to have dinner at his house one night. And he recalled the scared little kid the year before coming in. I didn't get in trouble much in my life, and it was important to me to get in trouble for that. And it was a good poem, too. I wish I remembered. That was a big day. I remember a lot of it. I remember a big memory for me is when my friend Jim Chestnut got thrown out. And I remember I was so surprised that many people, and there was another guy that got thrown out, Pat O'Hearn. I was so impressed with the amount of people that felt it was the students' fault for not following the rules, at least people I was hanging out with. It wasn't that Andover was bad. Chestnut knew there was a 2-strike policy, and he shouldn't have taken the second strike. And that always impressed me about the school. And I teach now, and part of my job is placing kids in boarding schools. And schools just don't have that same respect. The rules don't matter as much anymore. Those were the rules. I remember when Jim left. He was the kid I hung out the most with there, and both there and at home. And the fact that people respected Andover enough to have maybe the most popular kid leave and not want to burn the place down was amazing to me. Absolutely amazing.
Well, he was kicked out twice.
I wasn't there the first time.
The second time was after he'd been elected co-captain of the football.
Crazy.
He wasn't-
But he lived in Westport, I lived in Fairfield, so we still saw each other. Then he had a crazy year at Staples High School in Westport.
Okay, same question. Was there an hour, a day, an hour, or a moment that you recall as being the worst?
I gave a chapel speech in my senior year. I gave 2 chapel speeches, and the first one was kind of a keep your head up speech. And I loved the power of the chapel. And then I gave a speech about my father. And I ended it with a quote from a book by Harold Robbins called A Stone for Danny Fisher. And the quote was, to live on in the memories of those you leave behind is not to die. And I'm not sure why I did this, but I felt very sad after I gave this speech. And I remember I cut a couple classes that day. Everybody received it well, but I really exposed myself, and I wasn't sure whether I should have done that or not. Looking back on it, it was a very good thing to do. But it was a very tough time for me. I also remember a couple days senior year when I felt like I was outgrowing Andover, and I was glad I was only there for 3 years. I was ready to move on.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Rutgers University for a while, and then I was 365 in the draft lottery. So I moved to Florida, where my wife was going to school and had a great life. I was bartending and taking courses at University of Miami and got a philosophy degree and lived the 60s dream for a while.
That was 3:55, but I didn't turn on the radio until they were at about 3:40.
I was at a fraternity party at Rutgers, and I didn't hear my birthday called. And it's getting, 3:50, 3:60. I'm saying, oh my God. And then they go 3:65, July 7th, and I went nuts. Nobody understands that today, the power of that lottery.
Do you, by any chance, remember the Cuban Missile Crisis while it was happening?
Vaguely, I wrote something about it. I don't remember a lot about it. It's funny, but yes, I remember it happening. I had spent a lot of time in Miami as a kid. That's where we always vacationed with my family. Somehow I felt I should know something about it because of my relationship with Miami. I don't remember a lot about it. I'm much more vivid about JFK.
What were you doing when you heard that JFK?
I was in the weight room lifting weights, and Jake, the trainer, was there. And I think he's the one who told me. And I was so upset by this hulking guy coming in with tears, and there were only like 3 or 4 of us in there, coming in to tell us that the president was shot. I ran back to my dorm and watched TV for as long as I possibly could. It's a vivid memory of mine of this guy coming out crying. I thought his mother had died or has lost his hand, or I didn't know what had happened.
He had some connection to Kennedy.
Was there something personal there?
Yeah, he'd been a trainer at Harvard or something. He somehow knew him from college days.
See, I never got that far.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting because it was almost too much emotion. It was, not that there wasn't emotion, but I thought it was something personal.
Yeah.
I thought his wife died, his father dropped dead. I didn't know what it was. But that was very vivid in my mind, very vivid.
Remember any of the aftermath the next few days?
I remember watching it in disbelief to see the Ruby and all this stuff and just continually trying to figure out what was going on. I remember just following the news. I've thought about it lately as I watch news now, how different that would have been with the internet. How much more we would have seen. I remember just being very upset. I remember calling home, talking to my mother. You wanted to talk to somebody about it. You didn't want to be alone. You wanted to be watching TV with people.
Well, that was something a lot of people found out on doing this project. Remember was that they were very upset that classes were not canceled. And people were.
I thought
they were on the